Thanks, Sophie. Tonight on BBC London. NHS staff at London's largest hospital described the fear, trauma and lessons learned from COVID as we approach 5 years on from the first national lockdown.
I used to come in to work one day and it'd be one set of patients, and then the next day it would be all a different set of patients. And it wasn't because they were getting better.
It was really tough, and that, I think, it just shows how the NHS did pull together and did some really amazing things really quickly.
And I'm at the Wall of Hearts, an unofficial COVID memorial to the thousands who died during the pandemic, each one ensuring the memory of a loved one shines brightly.
Also on the programme, the cost of a cut, why hairdressers and beauticians have been protesting outside Parliament, and why Mary, who's 95 today, is celebrating with nothing other than an exercise class. Good evening and welcome to the programme with me, Frankie McCamley. We start tonight looking at the impact the COVID pandemic had on the capital nearly 5 years on since the first lockdown. It changed our lives forever and the effects are still being felt. Now a place of reflection, the National COVID Memorial Wall can be found along the Albert Embankment, and it's where we can join Riz Latif this evening. Riz, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, as we mark, as you say, 5 years since the COVID pandemic, at a time that was of deep uncertainty and navigating the unknown, it's the loss of loved ones that this unofficial memorial wall represents. It stretches half a kilometre along the embankment between Westminster and Vauxhall bridges, with each of the thousands and thousands of hearts a dedication to someone who died during the pandemic with COVID-19 listed on their death certificate. We know that it was an incredibly tough time, especially for medical staff working on the front line in our hospitals. Well, my colleague Carl Mercer has been back to St George's Hospital in Tooting to hear from some of those who worked through an unprecedented time.
It's the start of April in 2020. 23-year-old nurse Laura Blackmore is 2 weeks into working in intensive care.
It's actually very tricky emotionally, you've got to kind of just get stuck in and help each other out, really.
Whose hands?
They're my hands.
5 years on, we caught up with Laura and showed her our film from the first wave of COVID. What do you think?
It's difficult watching it back. Obviously I was really scared because we'd had no training at the time, whereas usually there's a whole programme before you join intensive care. And it was really nerve-wracking. I mean, I've never seen so many patient deaths before. I can remember most of the patients, I can remember their faces. I used to come in to work one day and it'd be one set of patients, and then the next day it would be all a different set of patients. And it wasn't because they were getting better. So it was scary. Every day was scary. I remember having the visor on and I could just hear my own breath. It was like when you're scuba diving, you can hear your breath over anything else. That's what it was like every day when you'd gown up outside the bays. But it was one of the hardest times of my life, for sure.
And it's frustrating, isn't it, when you can't hear?
Laura suffered from anxiety and couldn't work for a while. She's now back, though, as a ward manager, using the lessons she learned in COVID to help her current colleagues, while still trying to cope herself.
I tried to watch, there's a couple of, programmes about it, and I can't watch them at all. It brings all the emotions back. Just the noises. I couldn't go over to the other wing, the smells of the wings in themselves in the wards would bring everything back. And I never thought that that would be the situation at the time, but it's only afterwards. Yeah, I definitely still struggle with it, and I still think about that time all the time.
You see the other side, it could be your mum, your dad, your grand.
Consultant Jane Evans told us the same as she looked back on the material we filmed of her, back when the hospital had doubled the number of its COVID intensive care beds to 120.
So a lot of us felt lucky that we were able to come to work, we were able to feel that we were doing something. But that didn't then detract from how difficult it was to see people. You know, we saw our colleagues get sick. You know, we saw our friends and family get sick. Some people lost friends and family through this time. And so, you know, it was really tough. And that, I think, you know, it just shows how the NHS did pull together and did some really amazing things really quickly.
Relax, relax.
One thing that did emerge from COVID was the ability to transfer critically ill patients between hospitals. A new system called Access was set up, which has now successfully moved more than 3,000 patients. Nirav Shah spent much of COVID in intensive care and saw those upsides, but also the daily struggles.
When you think about where in intensive care normally there's one-to-one nursing, and suddenly we had one nurse looking after 5-6 patients, supported by nurses who've been redeployed from the rest of the hospital. But perhaps we're less specialist in what they were doing, and the burden, the mental and physical burden of that was immense. Similarly for the medical team, we were stretching and stretching, opening new intensive cares week in, week out. And that was a lot of hard work, and I think there was a lot of burnout after that.
And that's a common response from staff here. The physical effects of COVID, not necessarily visible, the mental ones, still very much so.
Were we to face another pandemic today, would we be better prepared? I'm not sure. Would it be any easier for anyone? I don't think so. You know, would our NHS cope with another onslaught? I'm not sure we would, actually. And I think so. It's a real mixed bag of feelings about it. You know, a sense of pride, but also a sense of real foreboding.
That was St George's, just one of the hospitals, Carl, that you visited during the pandemic. Can I ask, how did it feel going back?
You know what the weird thing was? That those 3 people I went back to see, it was the first time I'd seen their faces. Because when we went 5 years ago, and when we went throughout the campaign or throughout the pandemic, I never saw their faces. They always had masks and visors on, and you heard Laura speaking about that there, didn't you? The sound of the visor that she had to go through in 12-hour shifts, day after day after day. And I have to say, you know, big thanks to Laura, Nirav and Jane for sharing their memories with us, because they're difficult memories to share. A lot of NHS staff across London have had times that they don't want to remember, but actually can't forget at the same time. You heard Laura talking about that there, didn't you? And there is this thing called moral injury that staff in the NHS talk about, because they're trained, aren't they, to go and help people, to save lives. What they were doing during the pandemic was actually managing death in a lot of cases, something that they're not used to doing, certainly not on that scale, but something they have to live with. And you remember, oftentimes, they were the people that were saying goodbye to people who were dying because the loved ones weren't allowed in. So a really hard time for them to deal with and to remember.
Yeah, as you say, incredibly tough for staff on the front line, and we heard that there. Also some lessons learned as well, they mentioned.
Yeah, and I think the big thing, you heard Nirav talking there about this moving critically ill patients from hospital to hospital. That wasn't something the London hospitals used to do. They used to be quite competitive with each other, but what the pandemic forced them to do was work not just across regions like South West London, but across the whole of the capital. And they developed this system of moving critically ill patients as they were. Because hospitals were so overloaded, they had to share the burden. And there's this new Access programme, they call it, where they've now moved something like 3,000 patients across London hospitals. So when the need arises, London's hospitals can deal much better within each other. But there's also another interesting thing about what happens internally in hospitals. Because during COVID, loads of staff were brought in to man and to staff intensive care units, staff who weren't trained to do that. It meant that loads of units across hospitals that never used to speak to each other, never used to know each other, got to know each other. So you now have staff in different units, different wards, who now know each other much better. So it's been much better internally for hospitals as well.
So did you get a sense then of how prepared we seem in the event of something similar happening?
I mean, you certainly get a sense, and you heard Jane reference in it there in the film, that the NHS is still under huge pressure. And I think that is one of the issues for those staff. They went through 2 big waves of COVID, thought we're going to see the light at the end of the tunnel. They haven't. Waiting lists are going up. They know they've got a backlog from COVID. They are still trying to catch up. It's a huge one, something like 1 million people on waiting lists here in London at the moment. We've also got winter pressures. They're still carrying on. Then last week we had a reorganisation of the way the NHS works across the whole country. A lot of scratching heads from chief executives that I've spoken about how that is going to work under these conditions. So yeah, lessons learned. And we also know there is going to be a big emergency exercise, pandemic planning exercise from government and local government, which we're expecting to take place in the autumn as well. So lessons still being learned.
Okay, and meanwhile, of course, the COVID public inquiry goes on. But Carl, for now, thanks very much indeed. Carl Mercer there. Well, let's return for a moment to the wall of hearts behind me, the unofficial COVID memorial wall that started a year after the pandemic and then just grew and grew to now almost 250,000 hearts. And every week, a dedicated group of volunteers come and maintain it so that the memories of their loved ones can continue to shine brightly.
I'm Michelle Rumble, and I came to the wall because I lost my mum to COVID, Violet, back in the 9th of April 2020. I come on the very first day, so when I came, the wall was quite bare. So we were drawing hearts on that day for 10 days. We didn't have permission, so we were all pre-warned that there was a chance we could get arrested, because obviously we were in effect committing graffiti.
My name is Kirsten Hackman. I heard about the wall when it was being created in March 2021. So I came down on about day 4 of the wall's creation and painted a heart to my mum on the wall, who died from hospital-acquired COVID in May 2020.
I'm Lorelei. I'm one of the 10 volunteers who maintain and restore this wall. We're called the Friends of the Wall. I lost my husband to COVID early in the pandemic. His heart is on this wall.
My name's Terry Samwell, and I'm one of the volunteers of the Friends of the Wall that come here every Friday to help maintain the hearts and the dedications. My partner, she died of COVID on Boxing Day 2020.
The National COVID Memorial Wall is important to me because it's a permanent record of the nearly 250,000 people lost to COVID-19 in this country.
Every single heart on this wall is a person who has died with COVID-19 on their death certificate. And the ripples reached so far, it's not just the nearly 250,000 people that have died from COVID that are on this wall, it's the families who are affected by it as well.
The first time I came down here, I just couldn't believe the size of the wall and the hearts. It was very emotional.
I want my mum's memory because she didn't deserve to die. She shouldn't be on this wall, but I'm just so passionate about the wall because it needs to stay, because it needs to recognise all these lives that were lost.
We're now 5 years since the pandemic began, and for those of us who've lost somebody to COVID, it's something we live with every single day. We don't move on. We move differently, but we don't move on.
To come here is an honour and a privilege and a comfort to spend time with these people we've lost.
I'll be coming to the wall until I can't, and hopefully the wall will be there for life, and even for generations to come, it'll still be here.
And our heartfelt thanks to Michelle, Kirsten, Lorelei and Terry for their reflections. As we heard there, every single one of these red hearts ensuring the memories of loved ones don't fade. And all this week, as we mark 5 years on since the COVID pandemic, we'll be hearing more reflections and experiences of the impact it had here on the capital and the amazing lengths Londoners went to help others. Now though, let's return to Frankie in the studio with more of the day's news.
Thanks, Riz Latif and Carl Mercer there. A look at some of the day's other stories now. Police in Thailand say a woman from South London is still missing after a fire on a dive boat near to the island of Koh Tao. 21 other people were rescued, but 26-year-old Alexandra Clark from Lambeth is unaccounted for. The Foreign Office says it's supporting her family. The Court of Appeal has dismissed an attempt by some creditors to block Thames Water from borrowing a further £3 billion. The company argued it needed the money to restructure its debts and encourage new investment. The decision means it can push forward with its plans to avoid a government bailout. A man has pleaded not guilty to causing a public nuisance and trespassing after being accused of scaling Big Ben's clock tower and spending 16 hours perched on a ledge earlier this month. Daniel Day, who's 29 and from Essex, appeared in Westminster Magistrates Court earlier today. And most London boroughs are to increase council tax in the next financial year by the maximum amount allowed. Residents in 28 local authorities and the City of London will see their bills go up by around 4.9%. Wandsworth and Kensington and Chelsea have opted for a smaller increase. Now, hundreds of people who work in the hair and beauty staged a sit-in in Westminster over taxes they say are killing their industry. They're calling on the Chancellor to cut VAT. They claim without reform, the sector faces a 93% decline in employment by 2030, while the Treasury says the government is levelling the playing field for high street businesses, including hairdressers, by cutting business rates. Lakshmi Gopal has the details.
Save our salons! Save our salons!
Calling for cuts to save their industry. Voices of the hair and beauty sector at Parliament Square urging the government to halve the VAT salons pay on labour costs to 10%.
We're already more punitively taxed than anyone else. When you look at our industry, we employ 5 times as many people and we also claim no VAT back, which means actually we pay around 3 times the tax of other high street businesses.
The British Hair Consortium says more and more salons are choosing to rent chairs instead of employing stylists in order to avoid paying that tax. And a report by CBI Economics says that's likely to affect opportunities for apprentices.
The Vanilla Room Hairdressers in Hornchurch, East London, has a team of employed staff. The owner says there's an uneven playing field caused by the 2 different business models. With that and rising costs, while she usually takes on 4 or 5 apprentices annually, this year she's considering not taking any.
We can't survive without the future of apprentices, and a hairdressing salon like ours needs those bodies in the salon to look after the clients and to give the client a feel-good factor of being and coming visiting their local high street. It's just not going to work without them. So for us, we need VAT reform for that reason.
The government says we're levelling the playing field for high street businesses, including hairdressers, by permanently cutting business rates and removing the £110,000 cap for over 280,000 business properties, while also capping corporation tax for the duration of Parliament.
Cut our VAT! 2-tier care!
You only pay corporation tax if you make a profit. Margins in this sector are so small that doesn't even mean anything to us.
But that just doesn't cut it for those protesting. A sector, like many on the high street, facing financial pressures and perhaps precarious times ahead. Lakshmi Gopal, BBC London.
St Patrick's Day celebrations continue in the capital. A large parade was held in central London yesterday with floats, marching bands and dance troupes to commemorate the Irish patron saint. Well, today, people have been gathering at the Irish Centre in Camden, which has been serving the community for 70 years. Can you believe it? Layla Hayes went along.
Let's hear. So rock me more like a wagon wheel. Rock
celebrating St Patrick's Day with one of the biggest names in Irish country music.
I was actually gigging last night in the London Palladium, and then I got a phone call to say there was a bit of a celebration obviously today for St Patrick's Day here in Camden in the Irish Centre, so I said I'd call in, sing a couple of songs and hopefully make a few people happy, which we just done.
This year is the 70th anniversary of the London Irish Centre, so what better way to celebrate than with an event like this?
85-year-old Maeve Heath is one of the volunteers and has worked at the centre for more than 40 years.
I just love it. I love it. I mean, I'm here 3 days a week volunteering, and I just love coming here. It's a community, and I know everybody now. They know me, which is lovely, you know? And I think that's what keeps me going.
How long do you think you'll carry on working?
As long as I can. As long as I can. I told you I'm here till I'm 90 to cut the ribbon on this new building, and then I'll think of retiring.
And where better to gather for St Patrick's Day?
We have a tea dance going on at the moment. We've got 250 people from the elders community who are here for a good lunch and then a band and dancing. So people look to this centre in good times and bad, and I think that's what we'll see it through into the future. It's a place of welcoming.
A celebration of Irish culture. And the party here will go on long into the night. Leila Hayes, BBC London.
And if you know someone doing something rather special for others in their community, well, why not nominate them for a BBC Local Radio Make a Difference Award? There's a full list of categories and details of how to nominate on our website. Now, you may think at 95 Mary Marston would be taking things a little bit easier, but that is far from the case. The Zumba enthusiast has spent the morning celebrating her birthday, doing her favourite thing. She's also encouraging others to keep active too.
My name is Mary Marston. I am age 95, brilliant 95, and I feel on top of the world. I started doing Zumba year 2017. I love the music. I love I love everything about it. Feels to me as if they're my family. As you see, they're all greeting me warmly, and they're just a bunch of good people. I came from Jamaica, age 27. Lived in North London for about 4 or 5 years. Then I moved to South East. I have 4 children, 2 girls, 2 boys. I've got 4 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren.
Mum means everything. She's just always been so exemplary in everything she does, her positive attitude, her zest for life. It's just been great to be around all these years, and to have a mum at 95 that I don't need to support in any way other than just to be around. And sometimes I book her classes for her, and that's it.
She's a light in the room. She animates so well and helps you to feel warm and friendly and happy, because that's what she exudes. So whenever she's here, it's just like having your favourite grandma around and having a boogie.
Don't be afraid. Don't think that you can't do it. You have got to be strong will. You know what is good for you and you stick to it.
Happy birthday,
Mary! What an incredible woman. Well, now time for a look at the weather with Kate, who is also in green and down by the River Thames. Kate.
Thank you, Frankie. Well, it's quite cold down here on the Thames Path, actually. We've got this quite chilly easterly wind, which is whipping in via the Thames estuary towards us. But the good news is, as we head towards the spring equinox on Thursday, the temperature is going to start to warm up just a little bit. Now, looking at the map, we did have quite a lot of cloud today. It was rather grey. We had a few little breaks in the cloud towards the end of the afternoon. And as we head into the evening and overnight, that cloud will continue to get nibbled away. So it should be clear. We've got drier air coming up from the continent, which is taking that cloud away. So under those clearer skies, the temperature is going to drop. It is going to be a chilly night. We're looking at temperatures dropping right the way down to perhaps 0. So looking at a bit of frost away from central London first thing tomorrow morning. But with the absence of the cloud, it is going to be a bright start tomorrow. We've got plenty of sunshine in place for Tuesday. Now the wind still an easterly. It's still going to feel cold if you're out towards the Essex coast heading eastwards, or a little chilly, but with all that sunshine further inland, we're looking at temperatures getting back up into double figures. So between 10 and 12 Celsius widely. Now there's very little cloud around tomorrow, and that spills into Tuesday night as well. Under clear skies, once again, we're looking at temperatures dropping right the way down, if not to 0, even further below. So -1 potentially as we head overnight Tuesday and into Wednesday morning. But that's when things start to change. It is going to be a chilly start to Wednesday, but gradually we're going to get a southeasterly breeze. The high pressure, which has brought these settled conditions, just starts to drift a little. It drags in the warmer air from the continent. So we're looking at temperatures on Wednesday getting up to 16, 17 Celsius. Thursday, it's going to get warmer still. We could be seeing 18, 19, even 20 Celsius in 1 or 2 spots. We've still got the sunshine. Now Friday, it's still dry, but a bit more cloud, a degree or 2 cooler. But then we start to see those temperatures ebb away as we head into the weekend. Back to you.
Thanks, Kate. Go inside and go and warm up now. Well, thanks for joining us. That's about it from me. Asad will be here later with our 10:30 programme. In the meantime, you can catch up with all the latest stories on the BBC London website or the BBC News app. But for now, from all of us, have a good evening. Bye-bye.